So I was scrolling through my feed this morning, and you know how the algorithm gets you.
Oh, it knows.
It knows when you're stressed. It knows it's raining outside. So, of course, it serves me this photo of a villa in Jamaica.
Mhm.
I mean, we are talking infinity pool, white sand, the blue mountains in the background,
Yeah.
the whole 9 yards.
The whole package. I've seen that picture.
And for just a split second, I did the math. I thought, I could sell my place here, move down there, and live like a king.
That is the dream, isn't it? It's the escape to paradise fantasy. I think everyone has that moment.
Right. But then I started digging into the reality of actually buying that slice of paradise. And honestly, it scared me a little. It felt like I was looking at a map, but the map was in a completely different language.
That is actually a perfect analogy because buying property in Jamaica, it isn't just a financial transaction, it's a cultural immersion. If you go in thinking it's going to be like buying a condo in Miami or, a flat in London,
You're going to have a bad time.
you are going to hit a wall
Huh?
hard.
So that is what we're unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into a stack of resources from Jamaica Homes, specifically a really comprehensive guide by their founder, a guy named Dean Jones, plus some sidebar news that's been popping up. We want to figure out, how do you buy the dream without it turning into a total nightmare?
Because the rules of the game are just completely different down there. The source material makes that very clear. The system isn't broken, but it is distinct. It operates on a different frequency.
And if you don't tune in...
You're going to lose money, and you are definitely going to lose your patience.
Okay, so let's start with the mindset. Dean Jones opens with this concept that I found really striking. He says, in Jamaica, land is not just owned. It is inherited emotionally long before it is inherited legally. Now, to me, this sounds poetic, but what does it actually mean for a buyer? Am I buying a house or am I buying a therapy session?
Sometimes a bit of both. Look, in the US or the UK, property is an asset class. It's a line item on a spreadsheet, right? You buy low, you renovate, you sell high. It's transactional.
Yeah.
In Jamaica, land is identity. It's family history. It is proof of survival.
So people are attached to it in a way that goes way beyond the market value.
Oh, significantly. The guide explains that for a lot of sellers, parting with their land, it feels like an emotional rupture. It's family land. It might be the place where their great-grandmother lived.
So if I come in just waving my checkbook, treating it like a cold business deal...
You might actually offend the seller.
Wait, you mean they might refuse to sell just because they don't like my vibe?
Absolutely. The source highlights that sellers often want to know that the land is going to someone who, respects its history. And on the flip side, for buyers, especially from the diaspora coming home, it's often about planting a flag. It's about belonging.
So you have this really heavy layer of emotion on both sides of the table.
Exactly. And that explains why the whole process can feel sort of irrational to an outsider. You're looking at the price per square foot, and they're looking at the memories in the soil.
Right. And that clash of perspectives, I'm guessing that leads us directly to the pacing of the market. The guide warns, and this is a direct quote, "Don't expect American-style fast closings."
No.
This was the part that stressed me out. The text describes the system as more human, more layered, and sometimes slower. Now, when I hear a business process described as human, I usually just hear inefficient.
And you're not entirely wrong to be skeptical. Human, in this context, means the system relies heavily on people, not just on, automated databases. In the US, you pull up a digital map, the boundaries are exact to the inch, the title is clear. In Jamaica, you might be dealing with a title that is decades old. You might be dealing with boundaries that exist in memory.
Wait, hold on. Boundaries in memory.
Yeah.
What does that even mean? You mean the legal property line is just something that neighbors remember?
It happens more than you'd think, especially in rural areas. A surveyor's plan might say one thing, but the community knows that the boundary is the old mango tree or where the fence used to be before the storm in '88.
But trees die. Fences fall down. That sounds like a recipe for a lawsuit.
It creates friction. And that's why the expert advice here isn't to avoid the market, but to realize that due diligence isn't a checkbox, it's an investigation.
An investigation?
Yeah, you can't just trust the paperwork. You have to verify the reality on the ground. You have to talk to the neighbors. You have to see if the memory actually matches the map.
So if I'm the type of person who expects to DocuSign on a Monday and get the keys on Friday...
You are going to be miserable. The guide suggests reframing your timeline entirely. Patience isn't just a virtue here, it's a strategic necessity.
A rush tax.
If you try to rush a human system, you usually end up paying a rush tax, or worse, missing a critical detail.
Okay, so let's assume I've got the patience of a saint. I'm ready to respect the mango tree. Now you need to figure out the money. Step 1 in the guide is know why you're buying, which, I mean, it sounds a bit basic, doesn't it? I'm buying it because I want it.
It sounds basic, but the implications are huge. Are you going to live there? Are you building from scratch? Is it a retirement home? Or is it an investment property for short-term rentals, like an Airbnb?
Does it really make that much of a difference? A house is a house.
Oh, legally and financially, they are different worlds. A beachfront villa for tourists has a completely different tax profile, different insurance requirements than a family home. The guide really emphasizes that if you're vague about your intent, you'll end up with a mismatched property.
You could buy a place thinking you can rent it out, and then find out the local covenant forbids it.
That would be a disaster.
And speaking of disasters, let's talk budget. Because the sticker prices I saw online, they look pretty good. You get a lot more house for your money than you do in, say, New York.
The sticker price is the bait.
Yeah.
But you have to look at the whole hook. The guide lists a series of calculators you need to run: construction costs, HOA fees, and of course, closing costs.
And financing isn't straightforward either, is it? I saw something about interest rates being higher.
Generally, yeah. For local buyers, rates are often higher than in the US or UK, and the banks are very strict about verifiable income. But I want to double-click on something for the international buyers, the diaspora.
Right. I sort of assumed that if I'm coming in with US dollars or British pounds, I'm in a power position. The exchange rate is usually in my favor.
It feels that way when you're buying lunch. But a mortgage is a 15 or 20-year commitment. The guide explicitly warns about the currency exchange variable.
How does that play out in practice?
Well, imagine your mortgage payments are set in Jamaican dollars, but your income is in US dollars, or vice versa. If the exchange rate shifts by, say, 10% over 2 years, which isn't uncommon, your monthly payment effectively changes.
So you might end up paying significantly more than you budgeted for.
Just because the currency moved, your house basically becomes a forex trade you didn't intend to make.
And that can eat up your affordability buffer very, very quickly.
Exactly. The advice from the expert is plan buffers, not best-case scenarios. Don't look at the exchange rate today and just assume it will be there in 2030.
Okay, that brings us to the part of the guide that felt the most like a warning siren. There's a section in bold that just says, legal representation is not optional. Now, in the U.S., I feel like the lawyer is sometimes just there to rubber stamp the forms at the end.
In Jamaica, the attorney is your shield. And we have to talk about why, because there was a pretty alarming news story in the sidebar of the source material. Did you catch the headline about fake IDs?
Yes, fake IDs and stolen titles. That sounds like a movie plot. What is going on there?
It's a real issue. There have been reports of these property fraud schemes where people use fake identification to pose as the owner of a property. They sell the land, they take the money, and they vanish.
That is terrifying. So you could hand over your life savings for a piece of paper that's worth absolutely nothing.
It happens, and this is why Dean Jones and the guide insist on a thorough title search. You aren't just checking if the seller owns the land, you're checking if they are who they say they are.
And the lawyer does this.
A good one does.
Yeah.
They're essentially performing a forensic background check on the property. They're looking for encumbrances or caveats.
Okay, you're using lawyer words now. What is a caveat in this context?
Think of a caveat like a sticky note that someone else has slapped onto the property file at the land registry. It says, hey, the seller owes me money, or my grandmother left this land to me, not to him.
A sticky note from the grave.
Effectively, yes. And if you buy the land without finding that sticky note, you are buying the sticky note too. You inherit the problem. The lawyer's job is to find every single one of those notes and clear them before you pay a single dime.
That makes sense. But this protection, it comes at a cost. The guide lists a bunch of fees: transfer tax, stamp duty, registration fees.
And let's be clear, these are not small administrative fees. We're not talking $50 here and there. In Jamaica, the government generates meaningful revenue from property transfers. We are talking about percentages of the property value.
So if I'm buying a $500,000 villa, I can't just show up with $500,000.
Absolutely not. You need a substantial cash buffer on top of the purchase price just to handle the government taxes and legal fees. If you forget the price beyond the price, you could find yourself cash poor before you even get the keys.
The guide actually gives a specific red flag here. It says, if a deal feels rushed or discourages legal scrutiny, that is not efficiency. It is a warning.
That is the golden rule. If a seller says, oh, we don't need to get the lawyers involved, let's just keep it simple between us. Run
Okay.
any other way.
Okay, so let's say we've scared everyone sufficiently with the legal stuff. Let's get to the fun part, the hunt. You've got your lawyer, you've got your budget.
Mm.
How do you actually find the gem? Because I'm guessing I can't just rely on the internet.
Well, online listings, like the ones on Jamaica Homes, are a great starting point. But the source material makes a really valid point. They are not the whole picture. The best deals in Jamaica often move through word of mouth. They're pocket listings.
So they just sit quietly with local agents.
Or they sit with a neighbor who hasn't officially listed it yet, but is, thinking about selling. This is where that human system we talked about actually becomes an advantage. If you build relationships, you hear about things before they hit the market.
You have to kiss the ring a little bit.
You have to be present. But my favorite tip from the entire guide, and this is something I would never have thought of, is about the weather.
Oh, I love this part. View the property after it rains.
It sounds so simple, right? But think about the context. Jamaica is a tropical island. When it rains, it pours.
So, practically speaking, what am I doing? Am I standing in the driveway in a poncho?
Ideally, yes. You want to see where the water goes. A driveway might look pristine and flat in the midday sun, but after a storm, you might realize it's actually a riverbed.
You want to see if the roof leaks.
If the roof leaks, if the beautiful lawn turns into a swamp, it's a stress test for the house.
It is, yeah.
The source puts it beautifully. A house can look perfect at noon and reveal its secrets after the rain. That is due diligence in action. It's better to get your shoes muddy now than to pay for a new foundation later.
And that feeds into the checklists the expert provides. Boundary clarity, access rights, planning considerations. It just sounds like a lot of work.
It is work, but the text frames it as an investment, not a cost. If you skip this to save 2 weeks, you might spend 10 years fighting a boundary dispute with a neighbor who claims your fence is on their granddad's land.
Fair point.
Yeah.
Okay, let's fast forward. You've done the checks, you've survived the rain test, you're ready to close. The guide mentions that ownership is not fully secured until registration is complete.
And that takes time. This goes right back to our earlier point about patience. You might pay the money, but the bureaucratic machine takes time to issue the new title. You have to be okay with that limbo.
But once you have that title,
Yeah.
you're done, right? You just sip coconuts on the porch.
I wish. The guide introduces this concept of stewardship versus spectatorship.
I like that phrase. But isn't spectatorship just being a vacationer?
It implies a passivity that is dangerous for property there. The climate in Jamaica is harsh. You've got salt air, high humidity, storms, insects. If you are an absentee owner, a spectator, and you just lock the door and leave for 6 months,
You're going to come back to a disaster.
a disaster. Mold, corrosion, overgrown bush. That's why property management isn't described as a luxury, but as protection. You need someone checking the pipes, cutting the grass, airing the place out.
But stewardship is also about community.
Right. You need to be engaged with the people around you. You are looking after a piece of the island.
And speaking of the island evolving, there were a couple of other interesting sidebar items in the source material. One was about Jamaica's offshore oil question, and another about AI capacity. It seems like the backdrop of this real estate market is a country that is trying to modernize and fast.
It is. And while you might think oil or AI has nothing to do with your vacation home, they're indicators of the macro economy.
How so?
Well, if Jamaica succeeds in these new sectors, infrastructure improves, roads get better, digital connectivity improves. That lifts property values. It's a reminder that you aren't just buying an isolated block of land, you're investing in the future trajectory of the nation.
Which brings us all the way back to that idea of the future and the past colliding. We've covered the emotional weight, the slow process, the legal landmines, and the need for sturdy boots in the rain.
It's a comprehensive journey.
If we had to boil this whole deep dive down to a few golden rules for our listener who is still dreaming of that villa, what are they?
I'd say, first, listen before you act. Respect the local system and the story of the land. Don't try to impose your own timeline on it. Second, budget for the price beyond the price. Those taxes and legal fees are real. And third, never, ever buy without a lawyer who knows how to find those sticky notes.
I really like the way Dean Jones wrapped it up in the source. He said that if you approach it properly, Jamaican property ownership feels less like a transaction and more like a quiet handshake with the future.
That's a beautiful image. It acknowledges that you are just the current custodian of something that has been there for a long time and will be there long after you.
It really is. But, connecting all these dots, the fake IDs news, The push for a digital reset with AI and that deep emotional inheritance, it raises a really provocative question for me.
What's that?
Well, we have a system where boundaries are in memory, around
The old mango tree.
the old mango tree. But we have a country that's moving toward digital titles and AI-driven systems to stop fraud. So how is that clash going to play out? Can you digitize a memory?
That is the big question. Will technology clarify the past, or will it just complicate the stories that are literally held in the soil? Can an algorithm understand that the fence line moved because of a hurricane 30 years ago?
I guess we'll find out. Well, listener, that is something for you to chew on while you look at those glossy photos. Buying in Jamaica is a dream, yes, but it's a dream that requires your eyes and your wallet to be wide open. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll catch you in the next one. Stay curious.